Welcome to the Men After God podcast, where you will be challenged and encouraged as you pursue God, achieve success, and raise a thriving family. Join your host, Dustin, and his guests on a weekly journey to grow as husbands, fathers, and men after God. Here is your host, Dustin Alley.
All right, guys, welcome back for another week of the Men After God podcast. I've got a great friend of mine, a very kind man, and just a wonderful, wonderful person to be around, a man who loves Jesus, he loves people, and loves to introduce people to Jesus. His name's Stephen Monopetke. He serves at Emmanuel Baptist Church in Newington, Connecticut, and has been there for a good period of time. I'll let him share more about that. He's a husband, a father, and ultimately a man after God that I know each and every one of us is going to learn something from today as we hear his story of following Jesus and loving his family and then loving the people that God has called him to serve. Without further ado, Stephen, thanks so much for being with us here today, man.
Dustin, thank you so much for having me, man. It's my honor being here with you.
Oh, it's going to be a great day. Listen, so like I said before we got on, let's talk a little bit about Jesus. Tell us, how did you come to know Jesus? And then kind of like, what's your life been like? Were you raised in church? Were you out of church? What's your story of getting to know Christ?
Yeah, so I actually grew up Catholic, traditional Catholic, and you know what that means. It means you don't go to church, you just go through the motions, right?
Yeah.
So did my catechism, was, baptized in the Catholic Church. My parents were both immigrants from Guatemala, moved over here and brought their religion with them. And we just, they just try to figure things out, but really church wasn't a big deal to them. Maybe to them personally,
right?
They loved God, but the church part of it, it was not something that was front and center in our family. And so, by about the time that I was 18, 19 years old, going to college, I had a couple of buddies of mine who invited me to church. And if you knew these guys, you would know that they're not the church-going type. So it was such a strange thing to me to be asked and invited, to go to church by these guys who I knew as different kind of guys. So they piqued my interest. I didn't bite the first time, but they kept after me and they loved me. And I went on a Wednesday night in California, living in Santa Maria, California, going to a junior college at the time, and went to Calvary Chapel. First night that I was there, heard a message on hell. And I left. Yeah, no, that did it for me. I left there and just thinking the whole way home, I'm like, man, I really want Jesus. I really don't want to go to hell, and I want to figure this out. So that kind of planted a lot of seed. And then 2 or 3 months later, I made a decision at the altar at a church, and that was it. That was in 2001 and 2002 was when I finally made my decision in January. So.
Man, that is awesome. So you said you were going to junior college. Now, Stephen, I know you like to play basketball. Did you play basketball in school?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So can we get like some stats? Like, were you the next Michael Jordan and decided to just give it all to Jesus? Is that what it was, or he's just going to be humble, guys? He's going to be humble.
No, I love basketball. Obviously, growing up playing the game all the time, you have visions of grandeur, but they're not looking for too many 5'11" Hispanics, so I enjoyed my time in college. I'm a 5'8"
white kid from Northeast Tennessee. I didn't have a shot either, man. I feel your pain.
Yeah, so I mean, I did end up, when I went to Bible college, did end up playing there. It was fun. It was a blast getting to travel with the boys. That was a great time in my life. But yeah, no, just love sports altogether.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Now you're going to junior college there. You get saved. Now when did you meet your wife?
Yeah, so what happened after I got saved is I found a church in Santa Maria. The name of the church was Fundamental Baptist Church.
That was the name of it.
Yeah, it was nails, man. But there were sweet people there, and it was a culture shock. But the people just loved on me. They just loved me well. The youth pastor took me under his wing, and said, hey, maybe you should consider, going to Bible college. And I, as best as I could as a new Christian, I prayed and felt like that was the next thing for me. So I ended up going to Bible college and met my wife while I was in Bible college. We dated for a year and a half and got engaged and got married and went straight into ministry.
Oh, wow.
Just after
Okay.
God called me to full-time ministry, called me to preach, met my wife, and became a youth pastor. And
Okay.
just one thing after another. I mean, that was 4 years into my Christian journey. I mean,
Wow.
it was quick.
I love how quick it happened, because I share my story, man. And, I grew up I grew up in church, but I got away from my faith. And 2012, God used Afghanistan to really get my attention. 2013, he called me to ministry. I surrendered later that year. 2015, I'm an assistant pastor at a church. 2019, I'm a lead pastor at a church. And so I talked to some people like, wow, that was quick, especially
Yeah.
to have been away from your faith for so long. I go, yeah, it's a little bit of a whirlwind. Right.
Yes.
That's so cool. I don't think I knew that full part of your story. And so your wife's name's Amanda. You met her, and
Yes.
you guys rode off into the sunset, into a blissful, happy marriage with no problems whatsoever, and then decided to throw kids into the mix. Now,
Yes.
tell us about how many kids you have, and just a little bit about them.
So Dustin, our kids play sports together, and that's commonly where we find each other, right? On the sidelines of a soccer
Yes.
game or
Yeah.
basketball, and we're
That's
just
the only time we get to connect, man. I think it's just because we work too much. I'm gonna let Pastor Carey hear this one, just so he knows. Like, they don't have time for friends, Pastor Carey. They've got to get out. All right. I'm kidding.
Yes, yeah, no. So, God has blessed us with 5 kids, just sweet, sweet kids, and 15. Emily is our oldest, and she is so independent. She helps us out so much now.
Yeah.
But 12 years old, Steven, and Steven's the one that plays with your son,
Yep.
and that's where we're
Yep.
meeting. We're yelling at our kids. Ella is 9, and then I have the Sons of Thunder. I have
Yes.
Sam and Silas, and they're 4 and 5 right now, and
Yeah.
it's just such a good time.
I love seeing them running around at the games and stuff. Your youngest one, Silas, right?
Silas,
Silas,
yes,
the youngest one, yes, he's running around, getting dirty, and it's great. Boys
yeah,
being boys, that's good
boys
stuff.
mean boys, yeah,
Yeah.
always. It's
So
nonstop.
now, how long have you and Amanda been married now?
Yeah, 17 years. Yeah,
Hey,
going on
okay.
in June, it'll be 18. So,
All right. Sarah and I hit 17 in just a few days from the time of this recording,
oh wow,
here in December. So,
congratulations.
thanks so much. Yeah. It gets easier, right? Does it get easier? Do they actually start listening to me now? 17 the mark? Like,
I am going to act like you didn't say that. I'm just going to go on to the next
hey,
question.
my wife doesn't listen to the podcast, so I'm okay. I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good.
yes,
Right? Yeah.
yes.
Oh, that's good. That's awesome, man. So, Stephen, you've been serving Jesus for this long, man. Like, talk about, let me ask this. How long have you been at the current position that you're in?
Yeah, so, can I go back to, maybe
Yeah,
just kinda
absolutely. Yeah,
landscape?
yeah,
So I
yeah.
ended up going into ministry, and was in Georgia and served with my father-in-law and youth pastor there 9 years, and then I moved to Connecticut, and that was 9 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And when we first moved here, I worked at the academy and taught full-time there, and then 3 years in, I rolled over to the church side. And so I've been here for 6 years now. And as positions morph in church ministry,
Yeah.
obviously my role has morphed, but so I've been on the pastoral side for 6 years.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you're currently serving the young adults, and
Yep.
are you over groups as well, or does Derek do that?
Pastor Derek is over groups.
Groups, yeah. So
Yep.
what is your responsibilities? You've got young adults, and what else?
Yeah, young adults and then seniors. So we got both
Oh,
of
there you
those
go.
groups.
That's good.
And
That's
then
good.
missions, and we have some programming teams, on Sunday, and then the care of the church,
Yeah. Oh,
and
that's so
just
good.
all that comes with that. So,
Well, I'll let you know. Pastor Carey always brags about how you handle the care team and how
Mm.
well the people are loved on underneath your leadership there. And so, let's talk about for this just a minute. If Stephen, a lot of our audience is not pastors; they're not in ministry. We talk to Christian men that are seeking to achieve success in life with a thriving faith and family. And Pastor Carey explained it best whenever I interviewed him in November. He said that success is defined as faithful obedience to the Lord. A lot of times, I'm afraid that when those that are not in ministry, they don't think that there's any way to connect with our lifestyle, with the things that we do, maybe even the way we think and stuff. And at some and I don't mean this disrespectfully, it just is what it is. At some church levels, I think that's true. The smaller the church, the less organization, less structure, less work in that sphere for a pastor and pastoral staff. However, where you all are at, running the numbers that you're running, you really serve in a fantastic executive type role. And so if you could talk for just a minute, not removing the spiritual component from the work that you do, I know that's there and our audience does too, but let's talk for just a minute about what it's like, just practically speaking, serving the way you serve. Talk about some of the teams you lead. Talk about some of the organization that you've had to bring to it and what it's been like, because you've been with Emmanuel for 9 years. And so that church has grown. So one of the great things you've seen, and this is for any small business owners out there or anyone who's wanting to grow their business, Stephen has been at a church that has had to learn how to scale, which is exactly what you're looking to do. If you're looking to grow your business, you need to learn to scale. And a lot of that systems, processes, and things of that nature, delegation and different stuff. And so, Stephen, talk about some of that transition of scaling and how things have worked out for you there.
Dustin, that's an excellent question. And I'm sure that there's so many people that know how to answer this best. But from my experience, I think the thing that has been super helpful is to just be observant to the people that God has brought you around, because as well as I do that in ministry, you need help and you need support.
yeah.
And so I am convinced in church ministry, especially when you ask yourself the question, and a lot of us get to this point where we ask, like, I don't know how to get to the next point. And I think that God has the answers there in front of you if you're willing to look.
That's good.
Part of it might be, humbling yourself and not thinking that you have to do everything. Part of it might just be maybe a different perspective or being open to perspective. And I think so to speak to what you're talking about, especially after COVID, our church, I believe it doubled in size.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell the numbers because we don't really track them that well. But, when you're talking about doubling the care that quickly, or doubling, groups that quickly, or discipleship that quickly, or just in whatever area, I think God goes before us in a lot of ways. And,
Yes.
and he provides what you need when you need it. And so I think it's this balance of just working, never disengaging. Obviously we don't disengage, but just working to, how you can get in the middle of the tornado and just be filled with all the things that you just need to do.
Oh yeah, man.
And then there is the necessity of like backing up a little bit and getting perspective, and maybe asking a couple other people, hey, here's what I'm working on. What do you think? And I think that God has just in where I've been, he's blessed us with people that have good perspective, that I can go to and trust and ask them questions. And they know me personally as well. So they know my personality quirks and the things that I'm good at and the things that I'm bad at.
Yeah.
And so I think surrounding yourself with people that can give you good insight and input on what you're working on, I think is good. I don't know if I completely answered the question.
No, absolutely, man, absolutely. Because again, we want your experience and what it's been. And what I heard you saying is that during this time, and especially I'm going to use the term explosive growth of a doubling in size following COVID, and having to handle all those things. Your first instinct wasn't going to a system or a process or an organizational chart or anything nature. You immediately went to the people that are around you, and I think that gets lost on many of us, because I could find myself leaning towards the administrative mind and trying to, again, program it, or trying to get a process and system in place, not thinking of the people as much as I should, and how God's given them to us to be able to serve him together, not our own agendas, but his agenda. And I think that's vitally important for anyone in business and in small business, trying to grow a business. There's a question, not a question, there's a book out there. It's a question, the title of it, Who Not What, I think is the title of it. And it's really good at helping those of us that can find ourselves administratively minded, going more towards people than process. And I think that's one of the great qualities that you have, Stephen. And I want to share the story, but I don't. I actually want you to share the story
Uh-oh.
because one of the ways that Stephen does such a great job at caring for people that I know many of us, and I'm saying us, myself included here, we get so busy in the hustle and bustle and grind of life trying to make things happen, we can forget one very important thing, and that's just to be kind. And sometimes we really have to work at that. So, Stephen, I'd love for you to share the story about your wife and the van that we talked about before we came on air, because I want you to tell it from your perspective, and then we'll kind of keep the conversation going there. But guys, what I want you to hear is just this hilarious story, and then we'll talk a little bit about the kindness that comes after.
All right, so I hope I don't get in trouble. So I'll try to tell it in a way where I preserve some of her dignity and mine as well. So,
well, we'll start it this way. We've all made mistakes. Stuff happens.
There we go.
And we're all redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, even when you do something like that.
Oh, my soul. Well, in the story, Dustin, I'll tell it, but in the story, I don't know that my initial response was kind. And I know that it wasn't kind, but the Lord definitely worked on my heart and humbled me.
Amen.
For sure.
That's good.
So, let's see, it was about 2 months ago. We had a birthday party for my daughter, Ella, 9 years old. And what her desire was to get all the guys out of the house, and she wanted her friends over, and she just wanted to do this birthday party. So my wife planned it and had a bunch of Ella's friends over and pizza and just the whole thing, right? And at the end of the night, one of her friends whose grandmother lives right down the road, Amanda had told her parents, like, I'll just go drop her off like around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. So Amanda gets in the car, takes this girl down to her grandma's house, and was just going to drop her off. But at night, it had just started raining, and it was just dark. It was windy, rainy. You couldn't see anything. Where she was driving was really hard to see. So she is getting directions from the 9-year-old, and the 9-year-old's telling her where to go and what to do. Well, she's been there, so she's trusting the 9-year-old to tell her exactly what to do. And so she pulls up in this housing complex, and as she pulls into it, this girl tells my wife, my grandma typically pulls up to the door and drops everyone off, and then she goes and parks. Well, not being able to see very clearly, there was no light. She could see somewhat of a road that led to her door. So she said, and she could see some tire tracks there too. So she pulls on in and drops the girl off. Grandma comes out and waves at Amanda and says, all right, goodbye. Didn't say anything about what she was doing. But what she had done was she actually drove partly on a sidewalk and partly in a field. It was like a courtyard, and it was full of grass. And so dropped her off. She kept driving, and then she turned in because there was nowhere else to go. So she was going to do a U-turn, but it had been raining for about 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's just trying to drive in grass when it had been wet. You're going to get stuck.
Absolutely.
So I get this phone call. I'm just hanging out with the boys at my buddy's house. And I get this call, and Amanda's frantic. And she says to me, she's like, I have done the worst thing that I've ever done in the world. And I'm like, okay, like so in our family, like there's I've heard this before. So, my personality is just to say, okay, what is it? What could it be?
Yeah.
So I say, shoot, what happened? And she's like, I got my car stuck in the grass. And I'm thinking, it's Wethersfield. Like, we could pull this thing out. So I told my buddy, I said, hey, do you mind watching my kids? I'm just going to go help Amanda. I'll be right back. Well, I find her, and where I find her, she's actually, this courtyard was about 90 feet, and she was at the end of it, down in a drainage area. And the van was stuck. And my first inclination was, what in the world did you do? Like, I was not nice about it. I was not kind. And she had been outside waiting for me. And so she was soaking wet. She's like, I'm sorry. And in the moment, to be honest with you, Dustin, you're being very kind by saying I was kind. I was not kind.
No,
I was not kind.
Maybe I misunderstood the story.
Well, no. So the Lord worked on my heart. So,
Oh, I'm
a long
sure.
story
Yeah.
short, just to come to, I had to leave the car there overnight. We couldn't
Yeah.
rescue the car. I waited for a tow
Oh,
truck. The tow truck said, "Hey, there's no way I could get my vehicle in there. You're gonna have to
oh,
get a recovery vehicle
oh
to
my
come and pull it
goodness.
out." And they're like, "That's really expensive." So I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm gonna spend Christmas is right around the corner. I'm gonna
Yeah.
spend, a couple hundred
Hope the kids
dollars,
did.
maybe 500, $600. So I'm just, doing the mental math. I'm like,
Yeah.
how can I figure this out? We go to bed. I'm just upset. She's upset. She couldn't sleep. She's like thinking about how she's going to make some extra money to pay this off. Like it was just,
Yeah.
a big ordeal. Next morning, I wake up. I think to myself, I have an idea. Like there are toe straps that I could just go buy at Home Depot. And
There you
so
go.
I bounce out of bed after forcing myself to do my devotions. Like I
Yeah.
was reading in Zechariah. I'm like, what good thing can come in Zechariah? And Zechariah chapter 3, I open it up and
Yeah.
literally the scriptures say, if my vineyard, spoils and if I lose everything, yet will I praise the Lord. And
Oh,
I'm
there you
like,
go.
oh
Amen.
Lord, Lord,
Yeah.
like, why would you place that scripture there? So
Yeah. God, I needed something to help me be angry right now. Not
yes,
this. Not
yes,
this.
to justify my, so I
Yes.
pop out of bed
Yeah.
and I get inspired and
Amen.
she's in the living room and she's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm gonna go rescue the vehicle." She's like, "Who's going with you?" I said, and I was just being funny. I was like, "Me
Yeah.
and Jesus, we're gonna figure it
That's
out."
it. Zechariah
So
is coming too.
Zechariah, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I get out there and I call my buddy. I'm like, "Hey man, do you want to help me out?" Sure enough, we were able to get it out. We get home and she sees the car coming and I pull in, and she's there at the door waving, celebrating. I get up and I said, I just gave her this big hug and we navigated that moment. But I think the way that she tells the story, she says that I was kind because I guess I could have been a lot meaner than I was.
But I
But
gotta tell you, if I get a phone call from my wife and she says, I've just done the worst thing I could
yes,
do, I'm immediately like, do we need to hide a body? Like, what happened here? Like, what do you mean? And so, but yeah, handling that's great. Yeah. Oh, and
no,
maybe again, I'm hearing this third party. So, guys, the story is talking about my wife heard and told me about because
yeah,
it was just so funny. And she shared it publicly, which is why
yes,
I'm comfortable asking about it on a podcast.
yes.
But her comment, I think, may have been like, even my husband, who was just so kind,
Mhm.
was a little upset. Maybe that was it, and that would make sense.
Well, if there's anything you're talking about, you were asking me about care and about how to
Yeah.
care for people and that type of thing. I think over the last well, first of all, I would say that my wife has been probably the single most important factor
Mm,
for me to be empathetic. Like that did not come naturally to me. Um,
really?
oh, not at all, not at all. Like I have any
Wow.
empathetic bone. Like I could be nice.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's a difference between actually,
Right.
just being
Caring about
nice.
what's going on and smiling and waving goodbye. Yeah. No,
Yes.
I hear. Yeah.
Yeah. So, my wife has just been a super, just an amazing example for
Wow.
that. And
Okay.
then,
Yeah.
so Pastor Kerry comes up to me a few years ago during COVID, and he says, "I want you to take care." And in my
Mm.
mind, I'm thinking, I this doesn't come naturally to me.
Oh, wow.
And so I just but, when you have an opportunity and you're given responsibility, you wanna steward it and you wanna do a good job. So I'm like, "Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely, I'll
Hmm.
do it." In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know, like, if people are gonna receive my type of care well,
Yeah.
because before that, Pastor Derek is phenomenal with empathy. Like, he just does a such a he's also just such a
He
great
exudes empathy, like when he's
Yes,
just around people, right? Yeah, I
yes,
hear you.
yeah. So then during COVID, our family got sick. We were hit with COVID. We were down and it hit me pretty bad and Amanda pretty bad. And all of a sudden, I get care from our church in a way
Mm,
that gave me an example. The Apostle Paul talks about, I was an example to you, right? It's like
yeah.
not these ideas that we talk about loving people and care, it was like embodied by people that I could see.
That's
Pastor Kerry
awesome.
was on texting me every day, and the other pastoral staff were reaching out, and there was church family just like they would just come and drop off a bucket of like food and, all these supplies. And it just blew me away.
Wow.
And I think that was one of the points where I look back to, and I think I was given an example to follow. And the way that I learn is I just mimic, right? Like, I think that's probably how
Yeah.
most people learn, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You just
Mimic it,
take
make
this.
it your own. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So then I had that example, and then the Lord has put just wonderful people around, like, to the idea of looking who else around you just do this thing well.
Mm.
And so I think what I would say, Dustin, in my care role, God has given us so many people that do that well, and I'm always trying to look for those people and bring them onto the team and
Hmm.
just share the vision of what we're trying to build a care network.
I love that.
And so people just have taken that vision, and the Lord has done an amazing job with that. So
Man, I
I
love
would
that.
say
I
it's
think that,
less me and more of the church family for sure.
yeah, yeah, no, I hear that. I got to admit, Stephen, I know you. I mean, I know you decently well, right? I didn't know empathy wasn't a natural thing for you because you're such a caring, you're a kind person and stuff. And so let's talk for a minute. Then let's explore that, because I know there's guys like me that's in the same boat, And I really appreciated Pastor Kerry's honesty one time of saying, like, hey, I don't do well at hospital visits, all right? Like, you don't want me in the room, and I get that. For you, let's talk a little bit about maybe like 10 years ago
Yeah.
and what you've seen the difference between your ability to serve Jesus better and impact people's lives
Mm.
from where you were, 9, 10 years ago to where you are now when it comes to empathy and kindness and the way you're interacting with people.
Yeah, I think that, like I said, I think I was given an example to follow. I think I did the function back then,
Hmm.
um, and I would talk to people, and I was kind, and one of the things that I have been given several good mentors and friends that listen well, and I just value that. I value it when people listen and just they're interested.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've seen that modeled well, but I think the difference would be that when you in ministry, okay, so what we get to do and we have the privilege to do, you come into these moments where people are really hurting,
Yeah.
right? And you have somebody, whether it's a funeral, hospital visit, and people are just broken and they don't know what to do. And then they say these things like, thank you so much for all that you did. And I'm thinking to myself, I just sat with you and I listened and I talked to you and I prayed with you. Um, and to me, I
Yeah.
was I was just trying to live in the moment. But I think
Hmm.
that I think um, one of the ways that I learned to do this a little bit better than before, I feel like I'm always growing. So I don't
Always should be.
don't miss
Yes.
this day. Like, I'm not there, like
Yeah.
I'm
No, no,
growing
no,
too.
no.
So,
Of course.
um, but one of my biggest failures, I'll tell you, Dustin, was I got a phone call, and this was during COVID. Also,
Mm.
there was a lady that had moved away, and I think she moved to New York, and then a year and a half later, 2 years later, she came back. I did not remember her. She said
Mm.
that she knew me. I could not remember. But I was on the phone with her, and she gave me this story that her kids were not in school. They were very sick. They had COVID. They were down and out, and she was requesting for help.
Mm.
Well, that's part of the care. The phone call is going to come to me, right? So I take this, I write it down, I do the administrative part. I write all of this stuff down, I log it, right? And I say, hey, I'm going to go through the process of trying to get some help. I said, I can't promise anything just based on what I see here, but I said
Hmm.
I'd be happy to see if I can get a team of guys to look at this, and we can respond to your need. I hung up the phone. 15 minutes later, I get this scathing email from the same lady, like a long email.
Wow.
And she goes on and on to tell me that if I would have just simply prayed for her. She said, I understand that you can't provide monetary assistance, housing, you can't provide these things that I'm asking for. That may not be on the radar, but she said, you didn't even pray with me.
Mm.
That just crushed me.
Oh, wow.
Because if I want to do anything for people, I just want to take my heart as a pastor is just to bring them before Jesus, take them to
Yeah.
Jesus, be an example of Jesus. And I was not. I
Mm,
was just like any other person on the side of the street. Okay, cool. Give me your story and I'll see if I can help you, you know? And it just came across so unloving to her. And part of her accusation was probably invalid, but I just took it hook, line, and sinker. I'm like, you know what? This lady has a need, and I just completely missed the mark. Like I didn't even pray with her.
mm,
And it just humbled me so much.
wow.
And I thought to myself, if I get a call from now on, if I get a call, whether or not I can help somebody, whether or not I know them or not, at least I can pray with them,
It's good.
And
It's
so
good.
I have had that example now for the last like 4 years and three years. And I try to do that on a consistent basis.
That
So
is so good.
I think I'm just kind of learning from my failure as I go. And, you
Aren't
know,
we all,
uh,
right? And I think that's
yeah,
great. I
yeah,
love that testimony just for our guys. Just being a follower of Jesus and a man, we can often overlook just the importance of stopping and praying for someone. I mean, I'm as guilty of it as anyone. And and not just saying like I'll pray for you, but right there in the moment. Just,
hmm
hey, let's pray right now, and what that can mean to them. And again, you talk about business world and stuff. You never know what telling someone you're going to pray for them or asking them if you could pray for them. We're so concerned about are people going to be offended or is it going to be upsetting in the workplace? Like I. You'd have to talk to HR, I guess. But
right,
as
right.
far as I'm concerned, just tell someone, hey, I'm going to pray for you. Or, hey, I'm going to be praying at lunch today. Is there anything I can pray for you about? I don't think there's anything wrong there. You're not proselytizing. You're praying. It's part of it.
Yeah.
And you're actually showing care and concern for another person. But
Dustin,
just
part of
go
that
ahead.
too, sorry to interrupt you, is
No, you're
that
fine.
I think it brings me in the reality of how I'm living and operating and thinking. Because I think
Mm.
I'm more like you, where I can kind of get in the minutia of the admin work,
Oh,
the
yeah.
executive stuff.
Yeah.
But when I say in my mind, I'm going to pray with you, it resets for a second. Like, oh yeah, we serve a God who's
Hmm.
sovereign over all of this stuff, right?
Yes.
Like He is in
Yes.
charge, and so it helps me too, but it also brings them into reality, right? God is
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
charge.
And again, a reset, a reminder to us and to them, like, hey, I hear you saying you're needing this money for housing or for food or whatever. Let's go to the one who ultimately provides that. I preached recently a message about letting go of worry and how it comes from a place
Mhm.
of fear. And I think Paul wrote, um, with all prayer and supplication, with gratitude, going to
Mm,
God over your concerns and your cares. And he says that going with gratitude. It made me think about how who we thank for the things we have in life is really who we're going to look to in
wow.
order to have, to care for the things that are going on. And in our
Mm,
society and our culture today, we can find ourselves being thankful. I'm glad I live in America. I'm glad I have Stop and Shop down the road. I'm glad I got this gas station I get my stuff from. I'm glad I've got this. But Jesus said that he's the one that provides the food for the fowl of the air and clothes the lilies of the
wow.
valley. And if we're giving gratitude to God for the basic needs that he's providing to not to just sustain life, bread or food, water, clothing, a roof over our heads, then we're going to look to him for the same with gratitude to care for the weightier matters of life as well. But if we're
Yes.
continuing to look to government, society, the political system that we're in, or the businesses that are around us as our main providers, we're going to be sorely disappointed.
Mhm.
And for, again, Christian men, we can often, and especially the ministry side of things, our programming should suffice. Our
Mm.
administrative expertise should suffice. Our processes for handling care should suffice. While that plays a part, and I'm not going to deny that, we can't. We can't. And I'm preaching to myself here, to everyone listening. I can't
Yeah.
look to those as the sole what means by which God works.
Mhm.
God works because we abide in him, and he uses us that way. And so we got to go to him. And that's where that praying for someone really just, man, that's so good. I love that.
That is so good, Dustin.
So, Stephen, if there was one thing you could tell a guy that has your personality type, and I'm going to say ours just because you're talking about the empathy and your wife really helping you mold that in you, Like, what was one thing you would tell a man that's just in the world? He's not in ministry. He goes to your church. You work with young adults. Let's talk to like the 28 to 30-year-old guy starting a family. He got a job, maybe in business, maybe not. But he's out there. What would you tell him just about growing in kindness and empathy? I want you to think about that for just a minute. I want to talk to our listeners. Guys, today we've heard a great story from Steve and just how Jesus has worked in his heart, brought him out of a religion that led him to a relationship. He's now with his wife, 17 years, 5 wonderful kids, has had an amazing journey and has allowed his helpmeet to speak into his life, the one that God gave him to help him grow in an area that I know I need help in, and I'm sure you guys do too. And so I know you've gotten such great value from this. I hope you'll continue to get value from from the rest of the podcast episodes we've got, and we'd love to ask you to continue to prayerfully support us, but also if you'd like to financially support us, you can go to patreon.com/menaftergod and sign up there to be one of our paid subscribers. It helps the podcast keep going. And don't forget to head over to facebook.com/groups/menaftergod. Join our Facebook community where there is a group of men like Stephen and others that want to be here to support you as you seek to achieve success in life with a thriving faith and family, because you're not going to be able to do it alone. You need God to guide you, and you need a group of men around you to support you. And that's exactly who we want to be. So, Stephen, that man that you're talking to, again, 28, 30 years old, talk to him for a minute. Talk to him about growing in empathy and kindness.
Yeah, I think, Dustin, I think there are 2 words that come to mind, humility and intentionality. With humility, and I think probably the younger version of anybody, any one of us, right, doing the thing that we're trying to do, whether you're trying to build a business or you're in ministry, whatever it is, you think that you have to be the smartest in the room, or that you have to have some type of notch above somebody else to be considered or to succeed. And what I'm not disparaging is, hard work. Obviously we have to work hard and we have to do our work, and whatever we're given and we have responsibility over, we need to see to it to make sure that we're doing a good work. But I think humility to say, I don't have all the answers, and I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to be a continual learner, I think does take humility.
That's good.
And I think that sometimes the people closest to you, you kind of think of your spouse. Like for me, it's my wife. I'm always just amazed at how much I learn if I just slow myself down, right? And I'm willing to have a conversation with my wife, and she gives me perspective that I wouldn't otherwise have if I'm willing to listen, and just be humble. Then intentionality, I think, one of the biggest things that I think I always think about is that I don't want to live with regret later on down the road, right? Like there are certain things that I think, I don't want to have a regret about this or this or this or this or this. Right. And so what are some of the things that I could do, to avoid those pitfalls? And so, you kind of think of intentionality, as a dad, I could be involved, but that doesn't mean that I'm pouring into my kids. That just means that I am doing the thing with my kids without being intentional to disciple them and to love them and to show them, to invest in them. And that's one of the things that
that's good.
There's something that I'm constantly thinking about what am I pouring into my kids, so that way when they leave the home, they said, Dad really gave me something to walk away with, and that that takes intentionality, and it's hard, and I miss it. I miss it probably sometimes more than I hit it on other times. Yeah. But these things that matter, your family, your health, and the things that don't matter, are a lot of times the things that we give most of our mind to, our heart to, right? Things that are out of our control, right?
Yep.
And so just to keep things in the right priority, God, your family, those closest to you. Do you have a community of men that know you? Like they actually know you? Like they actually know what you're struggling with? Like have you brought those people into your life, right? So all of that takes intentionality, and it brings you back to reality. And I think God blesses that in a great way. and then just not to worry. God is going to figure out. You might not have good night. All of us probably lived at some point in our lives where we didn't have what we wanted, in terms of financially or where,
Mhm.
career, whatever.
Right.
God will take care of that if you just
Amen.
work hard, love God, love your family, just be passionate about your family, and yeah. So
I
hopefully that'll
love it,
be a
man.
blessing.
That's it. Enjoy the journey and growing like that. One of the key takeaways I've got from you, Stephen, that I want our guys to make sure they remember is that you constantly referred back to mentors, people around you, good people that you could listen to, you could model your life after and stuff, and then your willingness to listen to them, that humility. I think that's so huge, and that's where our podcast comes in. We want to be a guide, we want to be a help to men, and just we want to be that wise counsel as best as we can be. Ultimately, we pray all of our counsel comes from the Lord and through His Word, and we just want to share these stories so guys can know there are other men out there that are pursuing Jesus. They're trying to be a father, they're trying to be a husband, they're trying to have a career, a life of work that is honoring to God, that allows them to enjoy life and not just struggle. And it looks different in everyone's lives. But what's most important is not of it looking like someone else's, but of you following
Yes.
Jesus as He's called to follow you. And it takes that humility and intentionality. I love it. Stephen, thank you so much for being on here today, man. It's been a blessing to me. I know it's been a blessing to our people. And I will let you get off here because Stephen's got in-laws coming to town. And so he's got to go get ready for that.
I better be intentional right now to take care of what I got to take care of. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. And hey, guys, don't forget, connect with us, facebook.com/group/men after God. We'd love to have you in there. And then again, I know that if you go in there, there's guys that'll pray for you. There's guys that provide counsel and wisdom. And it's just a good group of men. We got over 440 as of this current recording, and continuing to grow just about every day as we're seeking to impact men with the gospel, and we're seeking to help them to achieve that success with a thriving faith and family. So Stephen, thanks again, my friend.
Dustin,
and I'll talk
thank
to
you
you
so much.
Yeah, man, of course. Guys, don't forget to tune in next week for another wonderful podcast from the Men After God community. We'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Men After God podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and keep up with the show by following us at facebook.com/menaftergod. You can also reach out to Dustin personally at dustin@seekconsulting.us with any questions or for coaching on being a man after God. Until next time.